Per usual, it's AMVET's National Executive Director, Joe Chanelli, your communications manager for AMVET's here, Miles Migliera. And today we are going to start off discussing a meeting that happened yesterday. So Joe, you sent out a tweet yesterday that read, just wrapped a productive meeting with the Biden-Harris transition team for Veteran Affairs. They asked for the meeting to hear AMVET's priorities, observations, and ideas. Open-minded, collaborative tone from the transition team. Veterans issues must be taken on a serious, nonpartisan effort. So, Joe, what are your initial? You listed a couple of them already in the tweet about the open-mindedness and the collaborative tone and just kind of feeling in the meeting. But what else? Just initially, how did you feel the meeting went?
Sure, thanks, Miles. The meeting went well, as advertised, as they told us it would be. It was purely a listening session with them listening and our team letting them know where we think the VA is now, where we think it needs to move forward to. It was really important to note that they asked us for the meeting. I think that's a great first sign here of the incoming administration. They want to engage with us, with our organization. We talked a lot about mental health. We talked about rural veterans. We talked about women veterans. We talked about equitable access and opportunities. They asked us just a few questions. Mostly it was us talking. One of the questions I was glad that they asked was, what positive momentum does the VA have now that they want to make sure they don't disrupt? What's going on that's working well that they don't want to mess it up. I was glad to hear that question. And, we talked about some of the positive developments we've had late this year, and we've talked about in the last few podcasts with more of a focus on mental health and bringing resources to the community where people really know these veterans and some of the alternative forms of therapy and treatment and community building. And they had, I believe, 6 people from the advisory committee that President-elect Biden had appointed. And then on our side, we had our National Commander, Jan Brown. We had our Chief Medical Executive, Sharissa Jackson. And then we had Justin Brown, who leads our legislative efforts, and then myself. And we met for a little over an hour by teleconference or video conference. In general, it was a really great first step, I think, to making sure that veterans organizations and by extension, the veterans who we represent, our members, are heard by this new administration.
It sounds like it. One of the interesting parts that you mentioned was that it was a listening session for the VA. I know we've been recently, AMVETS has been involved in a couple of calls where it's mostly a VSO listening session. And I guess that's something that you can expect from a team that's coming in wanting to hear how things are going from VSOs, as opposed to a team that's already in place, like our current one, who's relaying back to VSOs what they plan on doing. So it's interesting to hear the listening session go the opposite way this time.
Refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely. Another point that you brought up was the fact that they wanted to hear what was going well, because just, personally, one of the things that I think we should see through to the end is the Prevents executive order. We've got the roadmap in place. It's being implemented now, and it's going to take a couple of years until we can evaluate and see how any strategies, programs, what have you, how it all went on a veteran scale, so that we can compare and see if we want to use it for the American public and the suicide concerns there. Joe, was there anything that you had in your mind of things that you wanted to see the Biden-Harris transition team follow through on that's already kind of making its way through VA?
Well, a couple things. I'd say one, the continued focus on customer service, improving that veterans experience. And I'm very glad that the VA Center for Veterans Experience has survived 2 administrations now, and I think it'll continue to go strong into its 3rd administration, the Biden administration. The trust, continue to build trust, and veterans understand that VA is a safe, high quality place to receive care. I know a lot of veterans don't always feel that way, and until they are in the VA, they're not going to know. And hopefully when they get in there, they're going to be able to have a positive experience. And I think there has been a lot of build up and improving of that maybe the last 5 years. And I hope that continues.
Yeah. Something that was noted in that most recent suicide report, the 2021, was that there was a small decline in veterans using VA who weren't committing suicide as much. And there was an uptick in those not using VA resources who are committing suicide. And now it's time to make sure that we emphasize focus on, well, why aren't they using that VA care? And can we get more veterans into that VA care fold so we can see an overall drop in those suicides?
You're right. And in the mental health side of things, we have a lot of veterans, and we need to know how many and why, but we have a lot of veterans who are come in for help and then don't come back. And we need to find out why they're not coming back. The VA needs to do that. That needs to be a top priority, especially in the next, for the first year of the Biden administration.
So let's jump into this most recent string of tweets that you've had. Yesterday, you were, kind of consulting an incoming VA task force staff, and today you were actually updated by senior VA officials that are, currently within the VA. So let's jump into the first tweet that says, brief today by senior VA health officials on plans to roll out coronavirus vaccines once approved. You said medical personnel likely to be the first to receive this vaccination may begin before the end of 2020. Crucial to ensure VA staff at facilities cannot pass the disease, which is extremely important. It's important that people don't pass this disease, and then B, it's important that medical personnel don't get it, when
they're available.
Them to be on the front lines. Yeah, exactly.
Some of the biggest crises with COVID right now are in the Midwest, where we have hospitals that are unable to serve their communities because a large percentage of their medical personnel have been infected. And so, VA is watching that. They want to make sure that those who are going to actually be able to administer the vaccine or to help those who are infected or have other ailments as well are able to continue to do that. It makes good sense. And so they will be the first ones out. Pfizer, who was the first ones to say that they had a vaccine that has a 90% effective rate, is scheduled to go in front of the Food and Drug Administration today. We're recording this on November 20th, and they're scheduled to go in front of the FDA today. We don't know how long the FDA is going to take to be able to evaluate that and the safety of that. And the safety is a huge concern here, because if people don't trust this vaccine, they're not going to take it, and then might as well not have developed it, right? So we have to get to a point where the average American can trust what they're putting into their bodies. And maybe seeing the medical personnel having it first here will help with that trust as well.
Absolutely. Let's jump into number 2, which reads, VA aims to offer COVID-19 vaccines to all veterans and VA employees, hopefully in the spring. Older veterans, it's looked like they're going to receive this vaccine first. Others with high risk factors next. 50% of veterans are 65 or older. VA continuously is tracking the safety of the vaccine, and the vaccine won't immediately mean a no longer need for masks. How important is it to start with these older veterans? And I don't have quite too much to share, but I found out that my grandfather has COVID right now, and he's in a hospital. He's certainly over 65, and also is tied in with these high risk factors. How important is it, do you think, that older veterans receive this vaccine first?
First, I'm really sorry to hear that, Miles, and your grandfather and your family will be in our prayers. Yeah, we know that the older somebody is, we all get worn out as we age, and that's going to make our immune systems, less strong, and it's going to make the prevalence much higher for underlying conditions. And but as I pointed out in this tweet here, more than half of all veterans are 65 and older. Our veterans population has been rapidly aging for a long time. We have a lot of Vietnam veterans and Vietnam era veterans. We still have Korean War veterans, World War II veterans, who make up a big chunk of the population. So making sure that they are protected first, I think, makes good sense, and that will be the VA's top priority after they're able to get their staff vaccinated. And we are looking, the projections that the VA provided was that staff could be vaccinated if things go as expected with the FDA, in the coming weeks. We'll start vaccinating staff, and then early to mid-spring, being able to start vaccinating our older generations, and then also those after that, those that were at high risk for other reasons. So we're talking then at that point, younger veterans who maybe have respiratory issues or heart disease issues, cancers, things like that. I talked with Sharissa Jackson a little earlier today after this briefing, and she brought up some good points too, that we still don't know, though, with this vaccination, how it'll be affecting people who maybe have autoimmune deficiency issues. They have, maybe they're taking chemo, or maybe they have HIV, some of these things that are very real, and, should they receive the vaccine? Those are questions that we have that we're still waiting on answers from. Should everybody consult with their primary care physician before they take the vaccine? That's a really important question that we're looking for answers for, and we'll have before this becomes available.
Yeah, it almost seems like it becomes a matter of morality or ethics to kind of figure out what is most appropriate moving forward as far as who gets these vaccines first.
Right. And the last thing on this tweet, Miles, it was the last line on that one. The masks. I know most everybody hates these masks. It's become a political issue and all of those things. And, most states now have mask mandates. President-elect Biden has said that he wants to institute some type of national mask mandate. So I thought that was interesting that they mentioned they don't feel that just because vaccines start coming out, if you get vaccinated, it doesn't mean you don't need to continue to wear your mask. They don't know when that will be, but they feel more research, more study, more data will be needed first. At what point? And that goes back to also the VA says they're going to continuously track safety of the vaccine. So just because Pfizer says it's safe, just because FDA, maybe once they say it's safe before it's distributed, VA is going to be a key part of the national medical monitoring of the vaccines to see if there's anything that starts happening or if there's particular people or conditions that shouldn't receive it. They are saying that doesn't mean we're going to be, involuntarily enrolled in a trial here, but they're going to continue to watch it and see what type of side effects might come with it and report that out accurately. Is what they're telling us in a transparent way, was the word they used, which I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to jump too far into the mask thing before we get into the third
Sure.
one. I know we have people that like it, don't like it. Personally, I don't mind wearing masks. If I can kind of hide my face and be in the background, I'm all for it right now. This hasn't been too much of a bummer for me, but it is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is just because you get a vaccine, it doesn't mean necessarily that tomorrow we're done with masks. I think it's going to be just something in looking out for everyone's well-being, for the time forthcoming that we're going to be seeing this. Number 3 is kind of a two-parter. I asked whether, when I say I'm referring to you, Joe. I asked whether at-home caregivers would be in a high priority group. Told that's being considered. I asked about veterans in remote and rural areas. Told much thought is being put into that. The early focus likely on high populated areas. So it doesn't seem like there's much focus being put into caregivers or the remote rural area. I know a lot of places with the highest, spikes tend to be the highly populated metropolitan areas. What were your thoughts on those two answers from the VA?
So I was disappointed that neither of these were presented as part of the, what they presented to us initially. So I asked the questions, and the caregivers one, the response was disappointing as well. We obviously, especially over the last few years, have really transitioned to more caregiving taking place by a family member who lives with the veteran. And these are obviously, many of these veterans are elderly and poor health. That's why they need caregivers. And I believe that if you have an 80-year-old veteran at home and, he or she is being taken care of by a 40-year-old offspring of that veteran, that 40-year-old should be given the vaccine the same as that 80-year-old should be, and that same priority level, because that's where that exposure is going to take place. It doesn't sound like much thought had been put into that. Did bring that to their attention, so they've promised to look into that. After I asked the question, asked how I felt about it, and I expressed that. I think that's important. We've had a lot of focus on improving the caregiver resources, and we know that this is saving the VA a lot of money. It also makes for better quality of life for that veteran to be able to be home. So you need to be able to protect that veteran at home just the same as you would protect that veteran if he or she was in a hospital. And then on the rural veteran, we know a large percentage of American veterans live in rural areas. We know there's a lot who live too far from a VA facility to be able to safely or conveniently travel there. So did ask about that. So, obviously, if you've got a whole bunch of people in one spot, they're going to be more susceptible to spread. And they're also going to be it's going to be a lot easier logistically. And logistics is going to be a big challenge here, but a lot easier to, vaccinate a lot more people at once. If you're in the middle of, Washington, D.C. or New York City or Los Angeles, something along those lines, than if you're in rural Kentucky. But I've made it clear we can't forget about them. They did say they've thought a lot about that. I've asked them about community partners, about their mobile assets. VA has a lot of mobile vehicles and mobile pharmacies. They're able to go into these more rural communities and hold a vaccination event there if that's what's for those who want it. But the logistical challenge here is this first vaccine that's going for the FDA today requires extreme deep freeze to be able to let that vaccination dose survive. And so how do you get something out into a rural area, in a mass way, if you have to keep it, hundreds of degrees below zero? Your commercial freezer is definitely not going to do it. Commercial trucks, are not going to be able to do it. So that's a challenge that they're working through. There are second virus vaccine that had been talked about in the media being 95%, hasn't gone before the FDA yet. That one can be in basic refrigeration. They said when that becomes available, that could be a great way to be able to get that out to the rural areas faster.
Yeah, that's the Moderna vaccine, the second one that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which, I think a glaring early comparison is that you can, I believe, refrigerate the second one, whereas you were stating about the first one, it's a deep freeze that even commercial trucks can't handle.
And we're talking only the vaccine will only last a couple days, 2 or 3 days after it leaves the manufacturing plant. It's going to be a challenge for sure. I'm a little skeptical of the timelines being laid out here when it comes to those types of things.
Yeah.
And one thing we didn't mention here, and I didn't mention on Twitter, but these vaccines are requiring 2 doses delivered about 3 weeks apart. So you could potentially give someone a vaccine, and then for whatever reason, they're not able to, or they forget to come in for that second one. You have to start the cycle over again for them. And it's not real clear yet how long they'd have to wait before they'd be allowed to take that first dose again. So that human error certainly could be a major complication in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I would certainly hope someone wouldn't forget to come in for the second part of their vaccine. I mean, it's only, if you need a reminder, it's the number one thing we're talking about in the world right now.
Yes.
So basically, you just turn on your TV.
You just know it will happen, though.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things come out of people's control. I think something that our post should be considering is, how do you help somebody who maybe, one of your members is now running into transportation problems? They get the vaccination on, just say April 1st, and suddenly April 20th, their vehicle is broken down and it's beyond repair. They can't afford to repair it. How do we help each other make sure we can get there and to get that second dose, if that's what, none of us are immune to emergencies. It happens to everybody. And so how do we help each other?
All in all, I think the fact that we're, even though we have new questions about who's going to get the vaccine, how much the vaccine does, the storage situation of how you have to keep the vaccine temperature-wise. Even though we have all new questions, it's terrific that we're talking about how many people can potentially get this vaccine in the next 6 months. So all in all, it seems like it's a good story.
Yes, I'm glad they seem to be working hard on it. They're doing a lot of planning. I'm trusting they're going to be flexible, because we don't really know what happens next, but yeah.
So let's jump over into kind of the newest VA story that's unfolding. I think it's important that we note up front that these are still allegations. There's actually still an OIG report out there that has yet to make surface, that hopefully brings more into light on this situation. But we read a news story from Newsweek that starts out the former Deputy Secretary of Veteran Affairs, James Byrne, has claimed in an exclusive interview with Newsweek that he was fired for refusing to damage the reputation of a female Navy veteran who alleged that she was the victim of a sexual assault in a VA facility. Now, these accusations came to light actually a while ago. I think it was a few months ago. Joe, was it still this year that happened?
It was, I believe, February, because our National Commander, Jan Brown, testified about it. She included some comments on this in her testimony back in early March.
That's interesting. We'll have to go back and see if we can find that. Which there was a lot of things that happened in February that seems like they were 2 years ago. But essentially, back in February, this veteran was named. Newsweek chose not to name her in the story, so I suppose it's important that we don't add a name to it. I think a couple of important things that are going to play a factor is that she was a lead staffer for the House Veteran Affairs Committee. She alleged that she was sexually assaulted at the Washington, D.C. VA, and that Secretary Wilkie knew about it and was doing nothing about it, and that actually the opposite was going on. The former DepSec alleged that Robert Wilkie was looking up dirt on this veteran and had tasked him with sending it out into the ether, and that James Byrne had refused. So it's important to note that she's House VA committee staffer, a former one, because it's been noted that House VA committee chair Mark Takano and Secretary Wilkie often don't see eye to eye. It's alleged that Secretary Wilkie believes Takano was behind this conspiracy to drum up this sexual assault claim and to essentially get him ousted as Secretary of Veteran Affairs. So that's kind of the story in a broad nutshell. Joe, how much do you know about this so far, and what are your initial reactions?
Well, first, the allegations are very serious, and they were serious back in winter when they first came out, and I think they've become even more serious. The story after the Deputy Secretary Jim Byrne was fired, there were unnamed sources that kind of made some of the same allegations since then now, as of last night. Newsweek had that exclusive interview. We've now had a few other media outlets have talked directly with Jim Byrne as well on his story. His side of this has remained the same in his other interviews now. I think this is a extremely serious situation that needs to be taken seriously. I'm disappointed that it's taken this long, but I'm not going to pretend to know what goes into an investigation. But I believe the public needs to know immediately. I think the Office of the Inspector General should release this report as soon as possible. Jim Byrne said he did not go on the record and about this earlier because he didn't want to interfere with the election. I've seen some fair feedback or pushback on that. This is something that is important, but that's bottom line is it's completely unacceptable for the Secretary of VA or any cabinet level to try to, quote, dig up dirt on someone who has made a claim that they had been sexually assaulted, especially on federal government property.
Right.
And that's the bottom line here. And Secretary Wilkie said that himself back when this all came out. But if his actions didn't back up what he said publicly, that's a serious situation that is going to require a serious response.
Yeah, I think he had said something to the effect of, I wouldn't do that to a fellow officer. It would be improper. James Byrne also noted that he didn't come out initially after his firing because he didn't want to seem like a disgruntled fired employee, worried that maybe anything he were to say wouldn't kind of carry as much credibility or weight because of the timing of his firing.
There's probably some truth to that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, optics are sometimes everything, not always, but certainly sometimes. So this is a big story, and it calls out a significant portion of the VA. I mean, it calls out central office media, comms members, I should say, not media, but there's documentation that members of the VA comms team were looking for names of people who had claimed sexual assault, to which reporters didn't feel confident in giving out at the time. And there's allegations that their comms teams did not take this seriously, or their comms teams were misleading reporters or splitting hairs with reporters as well. So this jumps into much more than just James Byrne and Robert Wilkie. This is a big section of the VA.
It has potential to be massive for sure. At the end of this administration, and I think everyone's expecting that President-elect Biden will select a new secretary or appoint a new secretary, up for Senate confirmation, of course. Does it matter at this point? I think it does matter at this point. I think this is still very important for the public to know what's happened here and to ensure that government officials are not betraying the American public's trust.
I don't want to speculate too much, but I've got to assume that a lot of people from this comms team will be gone as well. I don't know Kirk Cashauer situation. I do know that Christina Noel was a part of Marco Rubio's comms team as well. So whether there's some kind of carryover from that or appointment from that, you can imagine a lot of the comms team will be gone as well.
Sure. Very typical when the president of the United States changes that we have massive changeover in most of the federal agencies. Obviously, there's a ton of careerists, who are employees who will stay on, and that's the way it should be. That's where the consistency is needed and comes in.
So has there been any initial VSO leadership to VSO leadership unity or reach out as far as kind of how VSOs and veteran advocates want to move forward, while these allegations have kind of been resurfaced?
There has not yet. I reached out actually to my colleagues and several of the other large organizations this morning. Of course, this article dropped about 9:00 last night, and the holidays, a lot of people are on vacation, things like that. And with COVID, a lot of us are decentralized anyway. But we'll be meeting in the coming week or so, which I know is probably not quick enough here, but in reality, it's what's possible right now.
Yeah, and I think the other reality is we've got to see if maybe even more things unfold. Hopefully, this report comes out, like you said, before then, and it kind of clears some of the fog and gives VSOs a clear path for how they want to proceed forward. Joe, that's really all I have on the story. Just considering that while these are serious allegations, they kind of still are that. They're allegations until more is brought to light. But is there anything else that you had on it?
No, it's a developing story. We're going to carefully watch here, and whatever is our appropriate role in this will be key. I guess we're ready to do whatever is right here. We just need to figure out what's actually happening.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, that's really kind of all I had for us today. Those two stories I feel were the most important and most relevant right now, and B, would take up kind of most of our time. Is there anything else that we kind of wanted to touch on before we go? Oh, you know what? I'm looking at it right now is the Rolling Stones Salute to Service.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going to be serving on the third and final panel, which will stream Tuesday, December 1st at 3:00 p.m. Eastern. That's 12 Pacific. It's the third panel of the Rolling Stones Salute to Service, which is the Veteran Advocacy and Support panel. So it's going to be facilitated by a Rolling Stones editor, and it's going to be a lively discussion regarding modern day veteran support, the current veteran experience in America, as well as personal stories from guests on their involvement in the cause. And one of these panelists is none other than country music star Trace Adkins.
And we actually recorded it yesterday, and it went really well. Great conversation. Really look forward to everyone being able to see and hear it. Recorded it from my living room, and a lot of important information, I think, came out of that. And just really appreciative of Rolling Stone magazine, which is obviously one of the most historic publications in our country. They get a little political, but I promise you the discussion that we had, the roundtable, was not political. So thankful for that as well. It really focused well on veterans and, on advocacy for veterans, how we fight for veterans and what we're fighting for, and why we do what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though it's December 1st, it's kind of a nice wrap up to what is known as Veterans Month, or Veterans and Military Families Appreciation Month. So if you'd like to register for that session, you can easily find it on our Twitter, which is AMVETS HQ. That's AMVETS HQ. or you can find it on our Facebook page, which is AMVET's National Headquarters, or just simply look up Rolling Stone's Salute to Service. You'll be able to kind of go step by step from there, but we'll be sharing it a few more times as December 1st creeps up on us, and you'll be able to register there.
The first two segments have already aired, and the first one was a great conversation about diversity among the veterans population and how we're all working to meet those needs and to right the system. And the second one, which featured our own Justin Brown, as well as Ken Falk from Boulder Crest, and talked specifically about mental health, was also very valuable, very informative segment. Those are both up online that anyone can watch now.
Perfect. Well, great. Joe, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention?
Just wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Continue looking out for one another. Continue those buddy checks. I know this year we've got a lot of restrictions on and guidance from our governments that tell us not to get together. Find a way though to reach out and say hello and share what you're grateful for with others. Yeah.
Before we jump off this, I think it's really important to note that I've been talking with a lot of my friends and family about this is, we came out of winter looking forward to spring, summer, fun adventures with friends and family, and immediately we're slammed with this virus in the spring, which, a lot of people, I'm sure, probably still had some level of fun throughout their spring and summer and fall, but it was definitely on a much, much lower scale. And now we're heading back into winter. So that can be detrimental on people. A lot of people have said that they're really feeling the effects of being at home all the time. And then now it's dark at noon 01, basically. You have your lunch and then, it feels like it's time to go to bed already.
We have some AMVETS members in some part of Alaska where the sun went down for the last time 3 days ago. It won't come back up for 6 months. So
wow.
The amount of daylight we have each day now.
Yeah, so it's definitely important to get those buddy checks in and check on people during the holidays. Holidays is especially a important time to do so. But perfect. With that being said, this has been another episode of the American Veteran Podcast brought to you by AMVET's National Executive Director, Joe Schinelli, and your Communications Manager, Miles Migliera, and we are signing off.